Before we dive into these scary stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy true horror content every week. When you are ready, lean back, and let's dive into this week's horror stories. Me and my friend named Kyle were out on a survival trip. We'd done it a couple of times before. We were both fans of the big YouTube channel Outdoor Boys who got us into this hobby. This trip was going to be the first longer trip where we would wander through a mountain range in Alaska. We'd booked our ticket and packed our gear weeks prior. When we got there, everything was fine. The nature was stunning, and the mountains were absolutely beautiful. We had planned a route beforehand and felt like we were pretty much ready to take on Alaska, but we couldn't have been more wrong. The first day went by fine. It wasn't until nightfall that we heard something unusual. Far away in the distance, we heard a roar. We knew there were bears in the area, but it didn't sound like no bear we'd ever heard before, so we figured it might have been a moose or maybe even an elk. Later that night, I thought I heard something brush against the tent walls, but I don't remember much of it. The next morning when we woke up, the weather was really foggy, which is what you can expect when you visit Alaska. We could barely see 80 feet ahead. We packed up our tent and continued along the route. A couple of hours later, Kyle, who was in charge of navigating, suddenly stopped. He looked confused and said, "We should have reached the other side of the mountain by now." I asked him how he knew when we were there, and he said there was supposed to be a big lake there. The fog was still heavy, and I got the feeling that we were a bit lost, but I didn't worry too much since we had satellite GPS as a backup. We continued walking, but as we never found the lake, we decided to put the map aside and use the satellite GPS. Kyle took it out of his bag, but when he looked at it, he had this shocked facial expression. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, "It doesn't want to turn on." I told him to keep trying, but after 10 minutes we were both realizing the seriousness of our situation. Being lost in Alaska is no joke. We tried to head back, but we couldn't recognize the surroundings behind us. Both of us assumed we had the satellite GPS as a backup, so neither of us paid much attention to remembering what our surroundings looked like. Shocked and freaked out, we stood there, and suddenly the roar, or whatever it was from yesterday, came again. The sound was so deep. It sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. We decided to continue a bit to space ourselves away from the animal before setting up camp. It would be easier to navigate when the fog wasn't there. We set up camp but didn't make a campfire as everything was too wet. We went inside the tent, made some food on our gas burners, and prepared to go to bed. Just as we got into our sleeping bags, the roar came again. It sounded like it was pretty close to our tent. We turned off our light and got the bear spray ready just in case. Kyle's hands were shaking as he checked the bear spray. He looked scared, and honestly, I was scared too. The whole situation had left a bad gut feeling in me. We'd never been lost on a trip before. It was pitch black outside. The fog hadn't gotten much better. Before we went to bed, I went out to pee. I didn't want to go too far from the tent, but as I got out and looked around, I noticed something maybe 200 feet away. A pair of glowing yellow eyes. I stood there looking at them, wondering what I was really seeing. Then another pair of eyes joined them. At first I thought it was deer or maybe even wolves, but then a rock landed right beside me. Another one hit the tent. Terrified, I pulled out my flashlight and lit the area up, and what I saw shocked me to my core. Two humanoid creatures stood there 200 feet away, half hiding behind tree logs. It wasn't people. It was something else. The way their posture was, it couldn't have been human. I yelled at Kyle to get out here. He sprinted outside. I told him what happened. The creatures had now disappeared, but we both knew they were still there somewhere. I told him we had to get out of here, and just then another larger rock hit our tent, causing it to collapse. Kyle agreed. We grabbed whatever gear we could, left whatever we couldn't, and started running out into the dark fog, keeping close to each other. We could hear the humanoid creatures in the distance. It sounded like they were laughing. Suddenly, more rocks came flying past us. At this point, I honestly didn't believe we'd make it out. We ran in the dark with our flashlights swinging around. Then we heard the roar again. We both knew what had made that sound now. We heard running behind us. We were being chased. In a desperate attempt, Kyle took out his flare gun and shot it towards the creatures. Everything went quiet. The only thing I could hear was the wind and the flare burning. Kyle took another flare and shot it up in the air, hoping someone would see it. It was a last desperate attempt to get help. The fog was now dark red from the flares. We stood there knowing we didn't have much time before the flares went out. I came up with the idea that if we turned our flashlights off and hid between the trees, they'd be unable to see us. Kyle didn't seem convinced that it would work, but we didn't have any other options. They were clearly faster and stronger than us. He shot another flare towards the trees where we last heard them. Then we turned our flashlights off and went low to the ground. Everything was dead silent now. The flares eventually went out. We couldn't see a thing, but we could hear them walking around. I picked up a small branch and threw it as far as I could, hoping it would make noise to attract them away from us. And it did. We heard them running toward the sound and eventually fading into the distance. We kept low and huddled together to keep ourselves warm. At dawn, we finally dared to move. The fog had lifted a little, just enough to see our collapsed tent in the distance. But there was something else. Small handprints in the mud, dozens of them, circling where we'd been hiding. Not animal prints, fingers. Long, narrow fingers. As the fog lifted, we could finally make out where we were. We traced our way back, slowly, cautiously, and eventually found a trail that led us out. What should have been a peaceful survival trip turned into something out of a nightmare. To this day, we have no idea what we saw that night. Those things, whatever they were, weren't animals. They were watching us, stalking us. They were smart, and they didn't want us to leave. I've done solo hikes before, but this was the first time I really pushed it. High altitude, no backup, completely alone. I'd mapped everything out. Weather looked decent, just some wind expected in the evening. No storms on the radar. I planned it down to the hour. The hike up took most of the day, and by the time I got to the summit and set up camp, the sun was already starting to set. The view was unreal. Just layers of mountains fading into the blue haze, stretching out forever. No sounds, no people, just me. It felt peaceful. I had this little crank weather radio with me, a cheap one from a camping store. No cell signal out there, obviously, so it was my backup in case something changed with the weather. I kept it next to my sleeping bag just in case. I had a protein bar for dinner, took some pictures, and settled in for the night. But even lying there, something felt weird. Not in a paranoid way. It was just too quiet. No wind, no animal sounds, no rustling in the brush. Just nothing. It was like everything out there had paused. I guess that's what living in the big city for most of your life does to you. Around midnight, I woke up needing to pee. I unzipped the tent, stepped outside, and just stood there for a second. The sky was so clear, stars so sharp they didn't even twinkle. I did what I needed to do and got back in the tent, curled up and tried to fall asleep again. Then the weather radio suddenly crackled to life. I hadn't turned it on. It started with soft static, then this hiss, and then, I swear to God, I heard a voice, a woman's voice, whispering. Latitude 39.44, longitude 106.19. I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Those were my coordinates. I'd written them on my map and saved them in my GPS. She whispered them again, and again. I reached over to turn it off. The knob was already in the off position. The static kept going. The voice didn't stop. I pulled the battery out. That finally killed it. I sat there, staring at it in the dark. My heart was going 100 miles an hour, but nothing else happened that night. At least not until I fell asleep again. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up to that same radio sound. Soft static. But the battery was still out, the switch still off. And this time, she wasn't reading coordinates. She was describing what I was wearing. Black fleece, gray socks, red zipper. I looked down at myself. That's exactly what I had on. I shot up and opened the tent flap. Dark, quiet, but the stars were gone. At some point, a thick cloud layer had moved in. I stepped outside with my flashlight and checked around the tent. Snow had started falling lightly. I looked for prints, anything, but the only ones there were mine. I got back inside and zipped up, not knowing what was really going on, and seriously creeped out. That's when I experienced something I'll never forget. It didn't come from the radio, but from inside the tent, right behind me. A voice whispered,
"Turn around."
I spun so fast I almost dislocated something. There was no one there, but the back wall of the tent had a long slit in it, like someone, or something, had cut through from the outside. I hadn't noticed it before. It was clean, almost surgical, not torn, cut. That was it. I didn't care what time it was or how cold it was. I grabbed my pack and just ran. Left the tent, left most of the gear. Flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. I ran downhill through rocks and brush, tripping and falling half a dozen times. My hands were bleeding, knees shredded. I didn't care. I just wanted to get away. After about an hour, I hit the lower tree line and finally got one bar of service. I called the nearest ranger station and told them I thought someone had been at my camp. Left out the weird details. Just said I was scared and needed help. They told me to stay put and someone would meet me at the junction trail by morning. When they showed up, I led them back up the mountain. The tent was gone. Not collapsed, not shredded. Gone. No poles, no stakes, no wrappers or gear, not even an impression in the snow. It was like I'd never camped there at all. I was already freaked out, but then something happened I still can't explain. The ranger pulled out his radio to check in with the station, and over the line I heard that same static. And then her voice, just once. "Too slow," she said. The ranger didn't hear it, kept talking like nothing happened. Only I heard it. After that, I never got any answers. The radio I brought never did anything like that again. They came to the conclusion that it was altitude exhaustion, or maybe even hallucination. But it wasn't. No matter what I said, they didn't believe me. And I don't blame them. But something was out there with me. I've always loved hiking the Rockies in late September. The air gets cooler, the leaves start turning orange, and the crowds are gone. There's this stillness that hits different. If you've been up there, you know what I mean. My buddy Mason and I have done a ton of hikes together over the years. Some rough multi-day treks, a few climbs that were probably dumber than we'd admit, even a couple of winter trips. We're not pros, but we've always known what we were doing. This trip was supposed to be chill. No service, no distractions, just us and a stretch of backcountry we hadn't explored yet. The trailhead was down this old dirt road. It was the kind of place you'd only reach if you didn't mind beating the hell out of your suspension. We signed the little logbook at the ranger box, threw on our packs and headed out. The trail wasn't on any official map. It was something Mason found in a forum thread, some abandoned fire lookout on a ridge above the tree line. The post was vague, but the pictures looked amazing. That was enough for us. First day was smooth. We made good time, found a solid spot just under the tree line, and set up camp before dark. When night arrived, the sky was full of stars because there was zero light pollution out here. It's one of those nights that reminds you why you do this kind of thing. Only weird part was this sound we heard after dinner, off in the trees. It sounded off, like a cross between a coyote and someone whistling. but far off. We didn't think much of it. Next morning, we packed light and pushed above the tree line. That's when things really started to feel off. I don't know how to explain it exactly. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. Every now and then we'd stop to catch our breath, and I swear I heard footsteps behind us. Not echoes, actual steps crunching the loose rock. Mason noticed too. "You hear that?" he asked. I just nodded. I think we both felt it but didn't want to say it out loud. We camped just below the summit that night. No fire as there was nothing to burn, just rocks, wind, and a lot of sky. It got cold fast. I woke up and no longer felt tired, wanting to see the night sky again. I got out of the tent. I walked maybe 20 feet out and suddenly heard something behind me. "Mason?" I called, but no one answered. Then a second later, I heard it again. My own voice. Same words, same tone, but it came from behind this big rock maybe 15 or 20 feet away. It was like someone had recorded me and played it back. I pointed my flashlight around, but there was nothing to be seen. I ran back to the tent and shook Mason awake. He looked annoyed at first, but when I told him what happened, he got serious real fast. "I heard it too," he said. "Earlier. It copied me when I said your name, but I just thought I was hearing things." We didn't get much sleep that night. Despite that, the next morning, Mason said he wanted to check out the summit. It wasn't far away, maybe a 10 to 15 minute scramble, but I told him I'd stay back and start packing. I watched him hike up the ridge until he disappeared over the crest, and that was the last time I saw him. I waited. An hour, then 2. No sign of him. Worried, I climbed up to the summit, yelling his name the whole way. Nothing. Just wind, rock, and empty sky. No tracks, no gear, no Mason. The whole day went by, with no sign of him. As the sun started going down, I had to go back to our camp. I figured I'd wait until morning and then hike out for help. I set up a shelter, kept my knife nearby, and tried to stay calm. But that night, around 1 in the morning, I heard someone walking outside my tent. Then a voice. It was Mason's voice. "Hey man, you good? Sorry I was gone so long." It didn't feel right. I didn't respond. He spoke again. "Come on, dude. Let me in. It's freezing." "What's your middle name?" I yelled. He didn't answer. Then I heard the tent zipper start to move. I grabbed my knife and yelled, "If you open that, I swear to God." The zipper stopped. Whatever was out there just stood there for a bit. Then it walked off. I didn't sleep at all after that. I spent the rest of the night being hyper alert. When the sun came up, I stepped outside and Mason was there, standing by the old fire pit we'd used. Same clothes, same pack, even the same little scrape on his cheek from the day before. He smiled like nothing was wrong. "Where'd you go?" he asked. I just stared at him. I asked him the same thing. He swore up and down that he never went to the summit. Said we got separated and he'd spent all night trying to find me. But that made no sense. I saw him go up there, and something was different about him. It was small stuff at first. He couldn't remember certain things. Didn't look me in the eye for long. His movements were weird, stiff, like he was thinking about how to act normal. But the weirdest part was that he didn't sleep. The final night I pretended to be asleep and just watched him. He sat outside the tent staring into the dark. All night. No yawning, no stretching. Just sitting completely still. On the hike out, he kept whistling. Same tune. 6 notes. Over and over. Not like Mason used to do. This felt patterned. Almost like a code or a signal or something. We got back to the trailhead. Drove home in silence. He texted me a few times after that. Even came by once. I didn't answer. Because I don't think that's Mason. I don't know what I saw or heard on that mountain. I don't know what got him. But whatever came back down with me, it's not him. I've since done a bit of research on skinwalkers, and I hate to think that might have been what I took home instead of Mason. And I think it's waiting for something. I want to go back. I want to look for Mason. I'm sure he is still out there. A few days after we got back, Mason went missing, which further proves my theory of it not being the real Mason. I'm terrified to go back to the mountain alone, but I can't just leave him out there if he is still alive.